To the organizers of Megacon, I have a question for you. Have you heard of this fancy new thing called a watch? As we approach the next launch date for Megacon 2025, that's right, the year of our Lord 2025 tickets go on sale March 7th of 2024. I wanted to break down my experience of Megacon 2024. Now, I have been an event manager both large and small scale since the year of our Lord 2008, and I have worked on such things as Grand Opera, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and launching giant cruise ship shows from across the sea. And I am here to break down both the very good and the very, very bad of Megacon 2024, as I see it as a person who usually executes these type of events as opposed to attending them. Well, we're here day one of Megacon Orlando. It's my first time here, so I don't know what the I'm doing. Now, to put this fully into perspective, I had originally only intended on going to Friday of Megacon. This was primarily because everything that I wanted to do was originally scheduled for Friday. That's until they announced the cast of Back to the Future was coming to Orlando.
Oh, great Scott!
And while originally on their Instagram page, it had listed them as being scheduled for a Friday evening session, they then moved it, once the tickets were available, to Thursday. And so, of course, what does that mean? That means I also bought a badge to go to Thursday. And while I was able to acquire my Friday ticket before the ship-to-home date closure had passed, that was not the same to be said as Thursday's ticket. So Friday's pass came to me via our good friends, the USPS, and Thursday's badge I had to pick up at the door. And one of my earliest missteps, as this is, of course, my very first Comic-Con I have ever attended, was I did not buy parking in advance. And for those of you that have just clutched your pearls, here are my pearls clutching them, because you know what I just said. For those of you who have never gone to a Comic-Con, let me break it down for you. Always buy your parking beforehand. Do not wait until the last minute, because if you wait until the last minute, you will be like me and having to pay $46.50 for one parking spot for 4 hours. We have already decided that tomorrow when we come back for Friday, we will absolutely not be dealing with the parking shenanigans because I, stupidly, did not buy the parking beforehand. So we just had to go with God, and $46.50 later, well, we found a place to park, but not ideal. And for those that don't know Orlando parking, and the fact that this is the home of the House of the Mouse, that is even high for us. But once we had shelled out the funds to park the toaster in her happy little parking spot, which I would advise always taking a photo of your surroundings, don't rely on your car alarm because it's Orlando and everyone else is doing the exact same thing. We headed inside, and while there was some signage at the door, I feel like it wasn't enough. Because by the time we got to the front door, what was visible was a prop check-in, another table which had no sign, so I had no idea what it was for. There were staff there, but there was nothing to tell me who they were, or maybe they were with a different event, because in fact there was a secondary Cattle Con also there that weekend, so as far as I knew, maybe that table was with them. The only way in which I knew where I was going and what I was doing was the one singular person at this particular door that was shouting at the top of their lungs to go through security using that lane. Which, while that is a very upfront and direct form of communication, it's not always ideal, as you should, especially in Orlando, have signs in multiple languages because there are definitely folks that are not primarily English speakers that are attending this con. And so once we had migrated through the security line, which was actually pretty quick, so not too bad, we wandered all the way through the hallways to get to the middle of the convention center, and there was nary a sign that told us where to go. However, we did thankfully find one staff member who did direct us that all ticket pickups were that-a-way. So that's the way we went. And once we had found the ticket booth area, I realized why you should buy your tickets and have them mailed to you before the cutoff date. While the lines weren't necessarily long, they definitely were not moving quickly. Now, we did actually have to stand in these lines for about a half hour before we were actually able to get up to the person just to get our badge. With badge in hand, we thought we were good to go. However, there was, of course, an additional step. These are the type of badges that you actually have to activate. Because buying them, attaching your number to them, is not enough. You must then link your account to your badge. Do I feel like this is slightly unnecessary? Yes, but we did it anyway. And one thing I will note is there was just a little URL, and there were no real QR codes which were available to be clicked easily, seen around. Unlike what the attendants were telling us, I saw one particular QR code, but there was a very large group of human beings around it, so we didn't go near it, and we just hand typed in the URL that we saw on the signs that were around us. With our badges activated now, we headed in to go check in. And this took us down a very long corridor that headed to a person at the end with a happy little iPad. And with that iPad, we just tapped and went on in. And this was one of the first places where I really felt there was a missed opportunity. Because once we had passed through the tap section, there was this huge section of the conference hall that was basically nothing but con exclusives along one wall, and that was it. There was nothing really else here, and I feel like as an event organizer, that space could absolutely have been used for other booths, other merch that could have been pulled out of the main space and put there for people as they walked in. Maybe the idea was not to clog the traffic, but it still felt like a missed opportunity. Now, upon entering, the very first thing that you are brought into is the main vendor hall section of this entire conference center. So on this level, not only is there the mainstream section of the vendor hall, where larger companies like Roosevelt's and other Army people were there. Why were you there, Army? But also the large sword dealers, corset makers, etc. were on this end. And toward the back of that section was the artist alley, and at the very end of this very large hall was where you would go to get your autographs and take photo ops. But as we knew, between the line that took far too long and the fact that we definitely had our pre-entry for the Back to the Future that was supposed to start at 6:30, we didn't necessarily have time to fully walk through this entire section before heading down to try to find Rachel Maxey, who was also at the con. Yay!
I'm clearly great at being the cameraman, too.
It's nice to meet you. Oh yes, you gotta do the high feet kick. And thankfully, because it was Thursday, there wasn't much of a line, so we were able to meet Rachel before we headed off to Back to the Future. Now, if you will notice, I did say that we headed directly from meeting Rachel to our Back to the Future panel. This was a grave error. But why was this such a grave error, Stephanie? Thank you for asking, let me tell you. In our email, it clearly stated that the doors were open for our holding area starting at 6 p.m. Gold priority seating, which is the ticket that I had purchased because I adore Back to the Future. If you can't tell. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I got good enough seats that I could see and hear everything really clearly. So we arrived around 6:15, and the room was about half full of these little taped lines that they had laid out on the floor. Which is perfectly fine because knowing the size of this theater, I knew that we would absolutely be able to get a decent seat with where we were in the line. And so we waited. Yay, fellow Back to the Future nerds!
88 miles per hour.
Like, that's epic. Here, let's get some lights in here. That's amazing. And I am not going to lie to you even a little bit when I say that the wait that we had not only in the quickly becoming very too warm room, and the wait that we experienced once we were in the theater was unnecessary. This event was supposed to begin at 7 p.m. We were told in our email that if gold priority seating were not present by 6:45 p.m., that the seats would be released to general public, which is perfectly fine and understandable, giving the general public 15 minutes to fill in the rest of the seats as they were available. This is not what happened. We waited in a very far, too warm room as more and more gold priority people showed up. The lack of air conditioning and flow in this room was really quite bad. And while we were in the room, we only really got one update, as that the event would be delayed 30 to 45 minutes.
Also, just so you know, it is first come, first serve. You have the option to sit wherever you want.
It's totally fine.
I understand that there is a window of grace period given, especially if you are meeting VIPs prior and doing photo ops and signings. But 30 to 45 minutes start time as a delay is absolutely wild. In any of my shows, if we delayed 15 minutes, that was obscene. But finally, a little before 7, we were finally ushered toward the theater. And once we were checked in with our little bracelets that were light blue,
so there's the rest of everyone. Go God, I hope we can get in.
We were basically told to go to either side because it was open seating. Allowing frustrated fans that had been waiting in very uncomfortable rooms to seat themselves is a really good way to have people running and potentially hurting themselves or other people. This is not the way to do this. At this point, Megacon should have gone from open seating to seating everyone themselves, because that would have not only saved a lot of hassle on the front end, it also would have saved a lot of hassle on the back end. But we'll get there in just a second. Once we had gone in and found our seats, I wanted to make sure that I had sat on the aisle. One, because I have a little bit of anxiety when it comes to large groups being on both sides of me, so having an aisle seat for me helps me to keep calm throughout the event. Because remember, I'm used to doing these events from either a booth or backstage, where there is basically no one near me and I'm the one in charge. So the idea of being next to a whole lot of people sometimes gives me a touch of agita. So we found our seats and we sat down. And everyone else filled in behind us, and we would stand up and allow people to go past us completely fine. What was not fine was how long we were in those seats. Because the wait was not 30 to 45 minutes.
It's been 5 minutes in the dark. I'm still waiting.
Our event did not start until 8:16 p.m.
Back to the Future panel!
76 minutes after the start time. And as I will remind you, Megacon was only scheduled until 9 p.m. that night. So not only was I annoyed and frustrated by the fact that it started this late, but also I was now concerned that we weren't even going to hear them speak for the entire hour that we had been promised. But while we were waiting before the curtain even went up, I kept noticing a staff member leading the platinum ticket holders into seats that were reserved for them. Platinum, VIP, you get my drift. Basically, folks who had paid a whole lot of money to make sure that they could get an extra good seat, which is why the front few rows had been reserved for them. What I didn't realize was that there was a VIP meet and greet right before this that was not only going to delay our event, but it was also going to keep us from being able to stay in our seats as VIP members continued to be seated until the very last minute, as they had not held back enough seats for all the VIPs that were still waiting. Dear Megacon, Fan Expo, whoever needs to hear this. If you oversell your VIP and start every single event late, all you're going to do is have a very pissed off customer base. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you that the Back to the Future panel was ruined because of this? No, absolutely not.
What are some of your favorite inventions or technology that were used in any of the films?
When they had all the gizmos, you could do 9 things at once. We do all that. We do 100 things at once now.
You know, where the future happens, and everyone says, there aren't flying cars, Tom. They're not flying. We weren't making actual projections. You know?
I will go back to him in King Lear, which I missed and I still regret. He's a genius.
What I am going to tell you is that had it been literally anyone else, I would have walked out after about 45 minutes. Because we, at this point, had not opted to eat, which I understand was completely our fault. And I also made the mistake of not bringing a water bottle or snacks. I'm a parent. I know better than this, but here we are. And so by the time the panel got out at 9:12, we were starving.
This has been such a joy having you guys here. Thank you guys so much.
And the other thing to note is that after we were done being issued out of the theater, we were also being yelled at to leave the building. At this point, Megacon, it is not our fault that you guys have stayed past your appropriate time. You do not need to have your staff members running around the 3rd floor yelling at everyone, "You need to exit the building now!" No, actually what I need to do is go to the bathroom and then I will leave on my own time. The fact that your event was late and you were the ones that pushed past the 9 o'clock hour is not our fault as consumers. That is your fault as an event staff. Okay, so we just got out of the Back to the Future panel, which, despite the timing of it all was fantastic. The 4 cast members were absolutely hilarious and amazing, and it was so much fun to see them all in person. Downside, we started 71 minutes late, 76, long time. I am starving. Ned is starving, right, Ned?
Yes.
Yes. So we're gonna go get food, not here, and we'll save the con food for tomorrow instead. So we'll see you tomorrow. Day 2. We are here for day 2 of Megacon. It is Friday. Let me just tell you, my very first thought was, the number of people here already looks insane. That's just a little taste of what we're getting into, but let's go inside before the line gets even longer. Arriving about 11 a.m. on Friday, we arrived to a very long line. However, I will note that it did move pretty quickly, and because thankfully we had our Friday badges, we were able to divert through the re-entry area and expedited our adventure back into Megacon. Going in this way actually provided a much nicer experience because there was a whole bunch of art that we got to see on this very large ramp down, and there was a huge section down below that was actually being very well utilized for photo ops. There were about 6 different backgrounds where, depending on what you were cosplaying, you could have a background to take fun photos and tag Megacon. Was the lighting the best there? No, but that's just me being judgy. But did that stop me from absolutely taking some ridiculous photos? No, of course not. And doing this reel. And because our day, the first day, had taken so long, we had gotten to do nothing except go through the main vendor section of the actual con, so we made sure to head over to Artist's Alley. Which, as an artist myself, of more fiber and other painting shenanigans, I wanted to make sure that we were absolutely going through every single aisle so that we could see all the artists that were available. And y'all did not disappoint. But I like that one. The artistry that I saw walking through Artist Alley was absolutely spectacular. I wish I had all of the money in the world so that I could give it all to you and take all of your art home. Kind of like Smaug, and just save it all for myself. Except I would actually hang it up on the wall or put it in its appropriate place as opposed to just like diving into it and living in it. Like a dragon. Not like a hamster like I'm doing. I don't know what that was. The only real downside to Artist Alley is that everyone felt very cramped, so it doesn't feel like there was much breath space between each booth. And so unfortunately, I sort of got quite overwhelmed and kind of ran everything together, so I didn't actually end up buying that much, even though I did want to support the artists. However, I will say the aisles in between the booths were wide enough for Friday that while it felt a little cramped in spots, it did not feel at any point unsafe or like I was going to find a crowd crush situation. But as a reminder, I did not go on Saturday or Sunday, so I cannot speak to the experience on those days. And one nice thing I do want to mention is that Megacon itself has its own app. And while there were some spots that were a touch on the clunky side, the one that was not was create your own schedule, which 10 out of 10 to whoever created that. Because while the schedule itself was inundated with things to do and people to see and events to go to, you were able to go through and heart your favorites so you could create your own schedule and have that be its own tab. So instead of being overwhelmed about, oh shoot, I said I wanted to go to this, but I forgot this, you had your own tab to go, I want to go to A, B, and C. Did that stop me from missing one? No, of course not. But hey, we tried. Sorry, Don Bluth, I really wanted to get to you. And so once we had traveled through Artist Alley a little bit,
I would like to see the baby.
They're not listed on there.
still keep on gonna die. We went to make sure that this time around we ate food first. And so we made our way to Four Rivers Barbecue. And while we have had this at other such large-scale events as Orlando City soccer games, this was very different than that. Because while the prices did remain quite high, which is to be expected for a con or a fair of any style, because you are innately a captive audience, and so therefore they can charge more for the services that are being provided. However, my husband ordered the pulled pork and macaroni and cheese, and I ordered a brisket sandwich and macaroni and cheese, which are two separate items, and I don't mind paying for that. What I do mind is that my brisket sandwich was bread, spicy pepper, crispy onions, one piece of brisket. I'm talking one small, thin, things that you would layer like 3 or 4 pieces on, one piece of brisket, and another large chunk of bread. I'm unclear if what happened was I just got a new person, or potentially they were just running out of brisket and trying to milk it, but $16.50 for one piece of brisket on a very large roll with some spicy stuff on top ain't it. The only thing that saved me was the fact that the macaroni and cheese at $6 was quite good and filling, so that way I could go to the panel without being starving this time around. And so with our food under our belts, we managed to make it over to Rachel's panel, which was a lovely little endeavor that was between her and Jen Markham. We had an absolute blast during the panel. It was a touch dark, but none of us really bothered to notice it until one of the head event managers walked into the room and realized no one had turned the lights on. So about 45 minutes in, we're all jarred into thinking that, oh, our time is done. No, they just had forgotten to turn the lights back on after the previous event, which was a very projector-heavy event. Scared the crap out of all of us. And what was lovely is while I was waiting for this event, there were 2 of you, I don't know if you're watching this, out there that came to say hi and took little selfies. And trust me when I say, it made my little heart so happy to meet you in person. Because I'm not a big YouTuber, but, you know, it's fun to be recognized.
This is where they put all the cosplayers back over here.
And while I personally wish they would have put the cosplayers a little bit more toward the main area somehow, my friends that I had met on Friday completely disagreed with me because they actually liked the fact that the cosplayers were farther away so that you could get a more intimate conversation going as opposed to having to talk over literally everyone else at the con. So I'm okay with being wrong on that. And after we did our little panel, we went back in to finish off Artist Alley because I was not about to leave without making sure that I had seen at least everyone, which was lovely because we also ran into Dapper Danielle while we were there.
Okay, I'm still recording.
And my personal favorite creator of an irreverent flock over on Instagram, the creator of Effin' Birds, who was a real gem to get to meet actually in person.
Can I get the finger?
And once we had finished there, we walked through the section with the professional comic illustrators and just took a peek back into the celebrity zone. Sounds like Twilight Zone if I say it like that. Where, despite me not really seeing large signs about this, and no one stopping me, I had my camera out, I was recording everything. Apparently I wasn't supposed to do that, but no one stopped me. And yes, I did walk past quite a few actual people that worked there, so I'm surprised no one told me, like, hey, you should probably put your camera away. I don't know these things. I've never been to a con before. And once we had finished there, we knew it was about time to wrap it up. So we are done here. It is a little before 4 p.m. because there is a lot of people here. Did you have fun?
Yep, definitely.
Excellent. Overall, I had a very positive experience. My happy little shiny brain that constantly wants new information, craves creativity, was completely creatively fulfilled by seeing everyone's amazing work. I was constantly floored by all the fantastic cosplays. There was a giant Cinderella's castle. There was a gaggle of Spider-Men. There was a small infestation of bats, but they thankfully did no harm. Another wonderful piece is that the breadth of artistry that was there, from just beginning to fully established creators,
Does that line usually work in bars? Would you like to be in my blog?
was really spectacular and honestly to be applauded by the Fan Expo, because the quality of people that they have to staff these events is very, very good. I also loved getting to be introduced to new cosplayers. I now follow Jen Markham because I think she's hilarious, and I had no idea she existed before this. And is that on me for not diving deep enough into Star Wars? Maybe. But now I know, and she's honestly hilarious, so you should go follow her. The biggest cons of the con was the food. Absolute 0 out of 10. Would not advise. Bring your own lunch, pack your own things. Do not try and eat this con food. It was bad. And this was bad across the board. Everyone I talked to was bemoaning the quality of the food this year versus the quality of food other year. Is it different? I don't know. I wasn't there, but I can tell you from firsthand experience that was not great. Not great at all. And dear Megacon/Fan Expo, you need to stop overselling your VIP experiences. I understand that is a big cash cow for you. I get that. But at a certain point, you have to start limiting the number of people in those experiences because it delays the rest of the schedule. It will throw off your entire grid. You will have worked for months and months and months to get this schedule grid just the way you want, only for you to oversell VIP and to delay everything and have to cancel things. And this is not just from the Back to the Future experience. This was across the board from multiple firsthand people that I heard that this was happening. You need to limit the VIP, period. But at the end of the day, did I enjoy Megacon? Yeah, I did. I did. Despite all of the hiccups, the foibles, the bumps, the bruises, and just a whole lot of human beings in one space, I did really have a really great time. I know I can come off as this big stoic person that's always, this is how this should be. But that's just to hopefully provide some feedback to Megacon if they see this. But at the end of the day, I did actually really enjoy myself. I loved being in the creativity all the time. I wish I could do these all the time. I really do. Because they are so much fun. And hopefully, I'll see you there next year after we have both sown in chaos. Bye. Oh, I started recording already. Oh god. Okay, great. So, we'll see you back at the studio to talk. No, like I have a studio. Who am I? What's happening?